Tennessee This Week from WATE 6 on your side starts now.
Hello and welcome to Tennessee This Week. I'm Don Hudson. The University of Tennessee revealed names of the people making up the Board of Fellows for the new Institute of American Civics. The 13-member board includes former governors Bill Haslam, Phil Bredesen, plus professors of economics, English, law, ethics, and public leadership. Governor Lee proposed the institute during his State of the State as a way to support state efforts on advancing civic education and constructive debate. Joining me today is Mary Ann Wanamaker, Executive Director of the Baker Center for Public Policy. And Governor Bill Lee, of course, described the the Institute of American Civics at the University of Tennessee as a flagship, a beacon celebrating intellectual diversity at our universities, teaching responsible, civic-minded people. I'm curious, can that really be put into practice today with the way we go at each other?
We think so. I mean, it's very consistent with the mission of the Howard Baker Center and the work we've been doing for the last 19 years. We are viewing our mandate as to create a robust civic ecosystem in the state of Tennessee, including civic knowledge, right? How does government work? What are the principles of our founding? Right. Civic engagement. Are people voting? Are they working the polls? Are they running for office? And then civic skills. Are they capable of having constructive debate across differences of opinion? And that's the part, of course.
I was going to ask you, can we?
Can we? Well, you know, Howard Baker, this is his greatest legacy, right? Is his ability to bring people into the fold, to listen to different perspectives, and to find common ground. We've been working on these skills with our students for many years, and the Institute is just going to allow us to accelerate those efforts.
Yeah. Obviously, on a broader scale, do you see that happening? Like when you look, I guess our attention goes to state or national politics.
Sure. Well, it's not, so, you know, it's not always the politicians that need to do this. It's also the people who need to do this, right? So
the neighbors and
so our mandate isn't about changing politics. Our mandate is about changing the experience of Tennesseans, that they can have constructive conversations in their living rooms, at their dining room tables, in their workplaces, at their churches, in all of the civic spaces that they occupy. That skill set of, hey, I don't disagree with you, but we can either agree to disagree or we can find common ground on certain issues, right, I think is really important. Forget the politicians. Right. Let's work on the rest of us first.
Yeah, it seems to bleed, you know, people see that and then they think, oh, well, that's okay to do because that's how people in suits and dresses are treating each other, and then they start doing it at home.
That's right. Yeah, they're looking to others for a model of civic skill, and I think what we've got to do is empower people to know, you know, it doesn't matter whether my representative or senator acts this way, I need to act this way because it's important to American democracy that I do.
On the flip side, in the same address that Governor Lee gave and praised the university and talked about strengthening civics, he also said some colleges and universities have become centers of anti-American thought. Do you believe that's true, and why or why not?
Well, I think what's certainly true is that universities have struggled in the last several years to accommodate all viewpoints on campus. Now, the University of Tennessee actually has a really strong record on this point. We've been quite good at this, but other campuses nationwide have not. And so part of our mandate here is to make sure that we continue the University of Tennessee legacy, that all viewpoints deserve to be heard, that we are better off if we listen to people who differ from us, and that it actually makes our own argument stronger to understand the other side.
Does the school go out of its way to do that, to try to bring in people from all different perspectives?
We do, and we have, and you know, I think if you go back and look at who has come to campus, but also who has come to the Baker Center in recent years, I think you'll find a wide spectrum of political views in that guest list.
What about when students bristle? I'll use that word. They say, oh, we're going to bring in, for example, maybe someone who's on a far right, and they come in and they want to start protesting that. How is that being handled? Or say, no, we're not giving them money to come speak. That's not who we want here.
Sure. We actually had a great example of this week. So we had a speaker at the Baker Center on Tuesday. There were some students in the crowd who disagreed with this speaker's history and viewpoints. They expressed that dissent in the event itself. The speaker engaged them in conversation, said, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad we're having this discussion. Thank you for saying that you don't agree with me. Let's talk about it. Right. It was really a fabulous model for the students, but also for the community members who were in that room to watch that.
And you don't see that much.
No, I'm so proud of that moment.
People want to immediately start arguing about it instead of saying, hey, Okay, we'll set that aside. All right, people talk about, hey, we should be on politics and civically, we should get along better, and that it's gotten so bad. But yet we can look at historical examples where maybe a senator or a politician took a swing at somebody or did something violent. Has it really changed? Because we've got people out smashing federal buildings, throwing Molotov cocktails at police, people going to the Capitol building and smashing windows.
Well, I mean, we've fought a civil war in this country, right? So certainly it's been worse. But I also think people of older generations now, so those who are 30 and above, certainly remember a time when we weren't so angry with each other. One of the things I worry about is that our students at UT, they don't actually have that in their memory. There's no point in their kind of living memory where politics functioned on a truly civil level. And so we think part of our job is to use Howard Baker's legacy to remind them it hasn't always been this way and it won't always be this way. It will get better.
Yeah, and it's true. If you don't know, and it's what the old saying, if you don't know history, you're bound to repeat it. And now you have a generation growing up where we haven't really had certain things take place. Certainly, we can't even talk about people who had to go off to, say, World War II or something like that, and how that changes from our parents' perspective and things like that. Talk a little bit more. You have mentioned Howard Baker, but talk a little bit more about his shadow and trying to use that and his pointing in his direction and his example.
Yeah, I think one way to think about it is that our current political climate, our civic climate, and especially for young people, there's this, Arthur Brooks calls it the culture of contempt, where someone who disagrees with you is your enemy. They're evil. They're not to be accommodated. They're not to be listened to. Howard Baker was the opposite of that. He saw someone who disagreed with them, and he saw it as an opportunity. He leaned into that difference and said, I really want to understand where you're coming from and how we might find common ground. That is his greatest legacy. And I can't think of a more perfect role model for all of us as we engage in this work than him.
Yeah, because we don't see a lot of that today. Jumping over to a different topic, to economics, and we just had a new jobs report come out. Unemployment at 3.7, 300,000 new jobs. Earnings are up 5%. People go, hey, I'm making more money, but inflation is still higher than our earnings, right? Are we going in the right direction? Is it going to get worse? Going to get better?
Yeah, great question. So I think the jobs report actually this morning was quite good. You're right, the earnings increases aren't as quick as inflation, but people are still, if you want a job, you can get a job in this country. There's still robust hiring. Unemployment is still really low. We don't think that inflation is going to get any worse. The only question is, how quickly will it get better? And a lot of that depends on the behavior of the Federal Reserve.
Yeah. And do you expect anything drastic, or just kind of riding where we are right now?
Yeah, well, I didn't expect COVID, so I don't, it's hard to predict the drastics. So, but no, I think, I think the common view right now, and I share that view, is that we'll kind of coast into a more reasonable inflationary environment, and we hope that doesn't mean we had to have a recession to get there.
Yeah. We could get into COVID, but this is not a health segment. This is talking about politics and civics.
Well, the economics of COVID,
yes,
how about that?
We'll leave that out. All right. Marianne, thank you very much for coming by, and thank you very much for talking to us and answering those questions. All right, still to come, our panel of pundits is next. You're watching Tennessee This Week on WATE 6 on your side.
President Biden speaking directly to the American people outside Independence Hall in Philadelphia, taking on his predecessor by name.
Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic.
After weeks of ramped-up rhetoric against what he calls MAGA Republicans, Biden using his speech to make the upcoming midterm elections more of a referendum on former President Trump than on himself.
MAGA forces are determined to take this country backwards to an America where there is no right to choose, no right to privacy, no right to contraception, no right to marry who you love.
Biden leveling charge after charge against Trump and his congressional supporters, referencing some Republicans who attacked the FBI following the search warrant executed on Trump's Mar-a-Lago home.
There are public figures today, yesterday, and the day before predicting and all but calling for mass violence and rioting in the streets. This is inflammatory. It's dangerous. It's against the rule of law. And we, the people, must say, This is not who we are.
Biden's remarks come days after he accused some Republicans of extremism during a private fundraiser and of embracing a philosophy akin to semi-fascism by following Trump. Before Thursday's speech, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy firing back, accusing Biden of dividing millions of Americans and criticizing his leadership.
President Biden has chosen to divide, demean, and disparage his fellow Americans. Why? Simply because they disagree with his policies. That is not leadership.
This weekend, former President Trump will be on the campaign trail rallying with GOP candidates in Pennsylvania. Ike Ajachi, ABC News, Washington.
Welcome back to Tennessee This Week. We are now joined by our panels, our political pundits, Courtney Piper and George Corda. Thank you both for being with us. Tell you, something's fairly fresh just happened was President Biden gave a speech, and we can get into the contents of it. We can also get into the criticisms of it and those who applauded it. That's where I want to start. Your takeaway, for those of you who actually listened to it or have read about it since then.
Well, I read as much of it as I could take, and I think it was a great speech for a national party chairman to give. I thought it was sad. I thought it was in some ways pathetic for a president of the United States to speak in those terms.
And when you say those terms, what do you mean, George?
Calling masses of people, who knows how many millions of people, enemies, essentially enemies of the state. Enemies of all of us right and good thinking people. What you're doing is you're demonizing people for political purposes. That is all that speech was. It was an attempt and an effort. Essentially, it was a pre-election speech for November. It was designed to motivate the party faithful, particularly those furthermore on the left, and unite them against this pestilence, in effect, as Biden was describing it, of people who want to destroy the country, all the while throwing in all of the things that he says that he's done well to make the country a better place. And actually, there's another factor going on here. The Biden administration has had a series of disasters it has had to confront of its own making, whether it's the southern border catastrophe, whether if Afghanistan misery, whether there's a whole raft of, you've got inflation still running at roughly the highest levels in 40 years. You've got a budget that is absolutely out of control. So what do? These people are the dangerous ones, and we need to be aware of them. I thought it was just a sad, sad moment for the American president.
Courtney, I'll get your take on it.
Calling out one of the greatest threats to American democracy, which is domestic terrorism, needs to be done, and it needs to be done more frequently. And it is the job of the president to do that. We have in this country a president who made it okay and normalized threatening rhetoric. It was okay for people to threaten one another. It was okay for him to threaten other people. It was okay to storm the Capitol. It's okay to take up arms against the FBI. We've never had a president do that. And as a result, we're in this very tumultuous place as a country. So to the extent that that can be called out, it needs to happen. And having the president do that, the current president do that, is incredibly appropriate. It's even more appropriate because there were a number of MAGA Republicans, and I would define those as Republicans who absolutely think that the election was stolen and not legitimate, who won their primaries. And to have that group of people that don't believe our elections are legitimate and think that this country is actively working against the American people is indeed a threat to our democracy. So these actions and this group of people and this ideology absolutely needs to be called out.
Well, there are two things to respond to there. Number one is that when American cities were burning one after the other in 2020, and radical leftists were creating autonomous zones in American cities where they said the police weren't allowed to come, and when people like Maxine Waters were encouraging her supporters to get out and attack, in effect, drive Trump staffers out of restaurants and stores. And when people were demonstrating and a man was found potentially threatening the life of a Supreme Court justice, did you hear this kind of rhetoric coming out of the left, out of Democrats? No, this is a political issue. And furthermore, if Democrats are really that afraid of this danger to democracy, why did the Democratic Party and its allies give more than $40 million to MAGA Republicans who are running for office? This is about politics, and that's all it's about.
Courtney, I'm be curious to get your take on that. There was a lot that happened prior to January 6th. That, of course, is never right to do those type of things, but similar things were happening at federal buildings, Portland, Seattle, other locations, and there wasn't a whole lot of, hey, this is bad then.
There was most certainly a lot of this is bad then and this needs to be addressed. But guess what? Those things are not happening now, unlike the repercussions we have seen from January 6th. And also how that was very clearly coordinated at the highest levels of government. The examples that George gave was not clearly coordinated by the highest levels of government. So this is a completely and totally different scenario. I don't know how you can put those kinds of actions on the same plane as hundreds, thousands of people taking over the United States Capitol and wanting to kill the vice president.
And just real quickly, so we stay on this, the optics of it all. I mean, CNN, which is generally a little bit left-leaning by most people's accounts, a bunch of their hosts and their guests condemned the president using the military. I'm interested in what you saw as the optics of this, not so much what was said, but the setting of it, the red lighting, the military behind him during the speech.
Look, the whole thing was a political job for one purpose, as I pointed out earlier, to try to motivate people. First of all, identify the enemy. The enemy is among us. The enemy is within. And we've heard this throughout history. When a leader gets in trouble, what do? They start finding a group of people to demonize and to say, these are threats to all of the rest of us. So you should vote for me and the people I support because we will defend you from this horde that seeks to destroy you and your country. It's just political gamesmanship in a dangerous way. If you want to talk about civil discussion, the president of the United States has a role to play. And Joe Biden, as he has in so many other areas, has failed miserably.
Courtney, I'll give you the last word on the optics of all this.
The optics are the optics. He was giving a speech to call out what is the biggest threat, one of the biggest threats to American democracy. And I don't think you can have a bunch of smiling people behind you that represent every race, color, and creed in the United States of America when you're sending that very pointed and serious message.
Okay. And why did the Democrats give $40 million to MAGA Republican candidates?
George, I don't even know what you're talking about or if it's even real. So
well, go on the internet and type in Democratic contributions to MAGA candidates. You'll get your answer, and then maybe
Googling is not typically how I conduct research for this show. But
what we're going to do is we'll look into that and make that a topic at a later time. Since we're brushing the edge of civil discourse, we're going to go ahead and talk about that in just a moment. But first, a brief break, and then we'll be right back. Welcome back to Tennessee This Week. We are joined again with George and Courtney, and we have moved on from President Biden's speech, and now we're going to talk about civil discourse, which could be weaved into that as well. But we have talked to some folks from UT saying that they're trying to teach students by using examples of how you can actually try to find some common ground. Are we past that point, or can we find common ground so that we can all get along, so to speak?
We're not past that point, but we do need to teach students again how to get there, because what they're seeing a lot on television, on the internet, is not civil discourse. The Howard Baker Jr. Center for Public Policy is a perfect place to do this because that was Howard Baker Jr.'s legacy. He had a legacy of reaching across the aisle to get things done. And that is what the most skilled and efficient politicians do, is they try to find that middle ground. They build relationships with people inside and outside their party to get things done. So to the extent that those skills can be taught and modeled for students today means that we can all have a better, more civil future.
George?
Well, I would use again the president's speech as an example. Do you go into a classroom and show that speech and then ask the class, is this an example of civil discourse? And let the class decide whether identifying all of these people as a danger to the country is a civil way to discuss things. And I find that typically it's a little bit like book banning. Well, when in Tennessee County, I don't even remember where it was, there was a book that it was taking off the shelves or something. We talked about it some months ago. All of a sudden around the country, there was an eruption of, oh my gosh, this is so awful, this is terrible, this is censorship, how can we let these right-wing extremists do this? But if you go and examine what are the most banned books in American libraries and American schools, you know what's always right about at the top of the list? To Kill a Mockingbird. Why is it among the most banned, this anti-racism book? Because people don't like the words used in that book. People say it's racially offensive. So they get the book banned. And you don't see widespread cries around the country, we got to do something to stop this censorship. What happens is when people on the right say it, it's called anger and meanness and censorship and uncivil. When people on the left do it, it tends to be referred to as seeking justice. So when the playing field is not level, you're going to have a hard time convincing people who are being called the enemies of the country that the other side is being civil.
And
there's no incentive.
There is broad confusion just in the United States of America of accountability and civility and civility. So you can hold somebody accountable and say domestic terrorists are a danger to our country and still be civil. Calling people out on their actions, holding them accountable, identifying a threat can be done in a civil manner. Now, what's not civility? Lots of things that Donald Trump has said and done in his speeches, talking about and actively encouraging people to take to the streets and overthrow the Capitol, telling somebody that he could shoot somebody in the middle of Times Square and still be elected president, inciting riots and violence. Those sorts of things are not civil. But definitely holding people and groups of people accountable, identifying problems and threats, can still be done in a civil manner.
So do Democrats ever act uncivilly, Courtney?
Everybody always acts uncivilly.
Well,
George.
you only mentioned 100%
perfect.
You only mentioned Trump and Republicans. I'm just wondering, when President Obama said, if they bring a knife to the fight, we bring a gun, was that uncivil?
I mean, I think that's a commonly used phrase in American culture.
Okay. My guy does it. It's okay.
George, that's a commonly used phrase in American culture, and he was he wasn't talking specifically and having a knife in his actual pocket.
Let me jump in right here.
Or a gun in his holster.
We only have a minute left, but just real quickly, and when I said, are we past that point, and each you can respond for about 30 seconds, I mean, the examples that we're giving our kids from Washington, D.C. on down aren't really good examples of civility.
Whether quite often I will see people actually on both sides of the aisle demonizing the other side in vicious terms, particularly on social media. And I will frequently ask the question, is this how you teach your kids to communicate? And frankly, it's not just the politicians, it's people in their dens on their computers that are part of this problem.
And Courtney, the last word on that. Can we teach our kids? Can we give them better examples?
Sure, we can. We absolutely can. And the university campuses and places like the Howard Baker Jr. Center for Public Policy can do that. Having a very robust civics and American government presence in our schools, K through 12, and then into higher education, is extraordinarily important for that.
Well, we have not solved all the world's problems, but we have certainly talked about many of them. I want to thank Courtney and George for joining us. I want to thank everyone for watching. You'll see us all week on WATE 6, and you'll see us back here next week for Tennessee This Week. Take care.
The views of guests on Tennessee This Week are their own and do not represent the views of WATE 6 and